This is the worst Hunter x Hunter review I've ever read, and because I've experienced it, you now need to as well. Hunter x Hunter is one of the many overrated shonen anime out there, and I can summarize my review with one sentence. If you became kinda interested in Hunter x Hunter because you have heard it so much more than just a shonen, don't believe it, because it's exactly that, just another shonen. Now, I'm not a fan of shonen, and if you read this review, you'll find out why. So this anime is not made for me, but just for more diversity in views, I will analyze the anime a bit closer. So I look forward to that analysis, but let's be fair here. Shonen isn't for everyone, and en masse it has a lot of problems as a genre, many of which can be articulated and reasonably argued. However, that is not this review. Hunter x Hunter is one of those anime where you can literally see the quality dropping, with the earlier episodes being made nicely, and at the end it has one of the longest pacings I have ever seen. Now, I do think it's fair to say that the Chimera Ant arc in particular is long. It's very long. Did it need to be that long? Maybe, but also probably not. That's not what this reviewer is getting at though. Since the art style isn't in any form detailed and costly, they can't tell me they ran out of money. I assume they just wanted to milk the cash cow to the end and stretch the manga material of 20 episodes in relation to the beginning to around 60. So what we have happening here is the One Piece argument, which is very legitimate with that series. The anime adapts less than a chapter's worth of material per episode. It is stretched out and milked like the infinite pirate cow it is. The reason why this doesn't work with Hunter x Hunter though is that the Chimera Ant arc is, yes, 60 episodes, but that arc covers 132 chapters. So that's an adaptation rate of just over 2 per episode, which is very good pacing. If that were One Piece, those 132 chapters would turn into 138 episodes. So the Chimera Ant arc is very faithfully adapted, so this criticism is misplaced. That's to put it generously. To put it bluntly and very ungenerously, the reviewer doesn't know what they're talking about, and from here on out their opinion should be disregarded from every sentence onwards. Like I said before, the start of the show was quite nice. It had a few things which didn't really make any sense, especially the riddles, but it had a nice build-up and a good pacing. It seemed to me as if the start also really wanted to surprise the viewers with something unexpected, regardless of how illogical it was. It also didn't do much good in terms of atmosphere. In some cases, it even destroys the atmosphere it built up just for surprise reasons, which is a very interesting critique. I wish the author had actually given an example of what one of those surprises would be and what atmosphere it ruined. I mean, if I'm being as generous as I can, maybe a surprise would be that the Hunter exam gets cut short, which ruins the atmosphere of the climax of the arc, but I'm also not sure that atmosphere is what this reviewer means to say. The main characters are also unexplained overpowered. Sure, there are a few stronger, but that alone doesn't justify a little kid being physically stronger than a well-trained grown-up man, just because he grew up in the woods, which is, by the way, contradicted later on. I kind of agree, not that it gets contradicted, but Gon is a superhuman for, let's be honest, not very well explained reasons. Super strength, super speed, some inherent understanding of martial arts despite not being taught by anyone, but that is exclusively the opening. In every arc that follows, Gon feels almost painfully underpowered. A child who is constantly, and I mean constantly, taking a beating from adult men, and no matter how much he improves, there is always someone to smack him back down. In the second arc, the terror already begins. Motivations from the character were completely forgotten and not even mentioned in order to have a little conflict for the goal of this arc. The reason for the first arc and what they have achieved was completely pointless and even contradictory as explained in later arcs. Again, I take issue with the word contradictory because I don't know what is contradicting what. And again, when you say things like this in general, you need to cite an example, because I legitimately have no idea what the author is talking about in any way, shape, or form. For example, which character motivation was forgotten and in favor of what conflict? But also, maybe this sort of writing is a strategy, to be so vague that I can't possibly refute any of the points being made because I don't know what they are. The following arcs shine with not knowing what to call some things. What? The so-called mafia is a bunch of unorganized idiots who apparently have a lot of power, they at least have a lot of money, which is contradictory in every way, and let me question the whole world building of this anime, and we still don't know what a hunter is and does. Again, the word contradictory. I don't know what he's referring to and how, because I don't know if powerful people having money is contradictory to anything Hunter x Hunter set up before that. In fact, I feel like it would be contradictory for powerful mafias not to have money. Although I do surprisingly agree that it does take a long time to find out what a hunter actually is. My wife had that criticism when watching the anime, actually. Like, most of our main cast are now licensed hunters, and we as an audience still don't know what that is. At this point anyway, of course we find out later on. The writers have no idea of how money works, which wouldn't be a problem if they hadn't dedicated a whole arc for money-getting purposes, which is later on also completely useless. One might even say contradictory. I wouldn't, but I'm surprised he didn't. And I think that this is referring to the auction stuff. Again, I'm assuming. In fact, I'm making the points for the reviewer who wrote this review. And yes, admittedly, a lot of the auction stuff does go nowhere. However, that doesn't mean it's useless, because what it does is reinforce the unpredictability of the series. You can never accurately know what turn it's going to take, because some plot threads follow through and some hit unsatisfying dead ends. And I also think it's fair enough to be annoyed by those, because that's not standard storytelling practice. You can't set something up and not pay it off. But at the same time, this person claims not to enjoy standard shonen storytelling. So whether you like it or not, this is something that definitely separates Hunter x Hunter from being just another shonen. Some of the arcs are complete filler, since they either are pointless or have nothing to do with the final goal, the motivation of the main protagonist. There is even one arc where the protagonist is inside a video game, and literally the first thing he hears is that being here is completely pointless. But he doesn't care and goes on anyway, which makes the whole arc pointless and questions the existence of the build-up to it. That's a pretty funny way of putting it, actually. I mean, I completely disagree. In fact, I think it's the exact opposite, but I do like out-of-context summaries. As much of a blue balls moment as it may have been for Gon, in the end, that message was all part of Jing's test, because he did program Greed Island with a mechanic for Gon to complete the game and find him. The test was, would Gon still go through with this even if he thought it wasn't going to result in reaching Jing? And he did. Gon passed the test. He didn't pass the second test, though, which was to see Jing alone. But this also establishes Jing as an unreliable source. You can never take anything he says at face value, which is very non-standard for a shonen series, where all information, no matter who it's delivered by, is intended to be truth to inform the readers. Meanwhile, sometimes in Hunter x Hunter, information will be blatantly wrong. Togashi will lie straight to your face, and it's up to us to interpret it as much as it's up to the characters. This show becomes less endurable from arc to arc, with the Mafia arc being an exception, but still not good. It's like comparing a pile of shit with a pile of shit which has a cherry on top of it. You know, at least an exception was made for Yorknew. It's an acknowledgement that it was a little tiny step up. Tiny step up is one of the most memorable arcs in anime history, but I want to know why though, because I think it's perfectly fine to not like Hunter x Hunter. It's a weird series. It is not universal. But this review is a lot of saying, yeah, thing was bad, but not adding it was bad because of the following. A thing that really bothers me as well is the fact that the show has no scale whatsoever. The abilities and strength of every character are so completely random and out of order. It even shifts during the whole anime, making character who should be strong considering their rank utterly weak, and character who should be weak unnecessarily strong. I'll say it again, I need examples. This is too vague. But to play devil's advocate, if I had to make the reviewer's argument for them, I'd say that characters like Menchi, Buhara, and Satots look very weak in retrospect, considering their status as presented at the beginning of the series. But also, I actually agree with every character being, quote, random and out of order, because that's how Nen combat is designed to function. Due to the endlessly creative application of Nen, a veteran top-scale Nen user could fall to an amateur with a favorable ability matchup. That's what makes Hunter x Hunter exciting. With the exception of a few characters, it cannot be scaled, which means that each new conflict presents new tension and new surprises. And I guess if you wanted a more clear scale, then what you would go and do is read a more standard shonen where whoever has the most ki, whoever has the most chakras, whoever has the most ryatsus just wins. So again, this criticism is that Hunter x Hunter isn't a standard shonen, whereas this review is all about saying Hunter x Hunter is a standard shonen and I will prove to you why. The Chimera Ant arc is the worst thing I have seen in a long time in terms of writing. And here we go. None of the so-called ant villains look even remotely like an ant. That's kind of the point of the ants. The ants are the base and they absorb the qualities of their food. And it's literally the entire ideological exploration of the arc. What makes a human human? Can you still be human as an ant? And are you still an ant even though you physically and mentally departed from anthood? Also on the flip side, does being a human prevent you becoming an instinctual animal-like monster? So Togashi really needs to blur those lines and make us question what is a human, what is an ant, and he does that by not making them all look like ants. Not to mention how boring would the arc be if every single Chimera Ant just looks like the queen. The writers wanted to make this show dark and mature, but only showed how childish their writing is. Again, example, which part of the writing was childish? But also notice the reviewer says writers, plural. That one simple S proving that they don't know anything about manga production or did any research on the production of the series at all. Not that you should have to write a review, but if you're gonna make a claim like this, then yeah, you do. Hunter x Hunter is written by a single author, and while this might be a pretty petty point to dwell on, I do think it's very telling of the swift assumptions the reviewer makes. In this arc, Hunter x Hunter really shows how little time they spend with thinking through the whole thing. Where villains came from and what their motivation is was never a thing Hunter x Hunter spends any time in, but in this case it makes absolutely no sense that some ant people who just came into existence are able to be as strong as one of the strongest person in the whole anime, so again, no scale existed. I think this is wild because the motivation of the ants is almost exclusively what this arc focuses on. The ants start in this place of mindless obedience, and then gradually they all develop their individual personalities and conflict arises. Especially Meruem, who undergoes an in-depth exploration of what it means to be specifically the king and is struggling with his ant versus human ideologies. So to say that they have no motivation just tells me that you didn't listen to the dialogue. I think it's fine to say that you maybe didn't like their motivation, that you didn't care about the motivation, but to say that it simply wasn't there is just blanketly false. And in fact, we spend so much more time diving into those characters and exploring motivations than we do on fights, which is very non-standard shonen. Lots of introspective examinations of characters like Ikalgo, Welfin, Chitu, Leol, and so on and so forth. There's so many. And of course, the existence of the ants as a whole is explained in the next arc, because not every mystery needs to be solved immediately. And also, not every unsolved mystery is dissatisfying either. And I guess if you want those plain, obvious, in-your-face explanations, then you need to read a more standard shonen. In the last arc, the tactics really shine. Oh, this is nice. In terms of sucking... Sick burn, bro. In the last 50 episodes, there is only one fight anyways, so there is not much to talk about. That's a hyperbole, but this is kind of what I was saying. We spend so much time focusing on motivations and characters that the fights are actually quite sparse. Now, if what you want is less character examination and more punch-fighty action, then I'll say it again. What you need is a more standard shonen, which is the thing you don't like. However, you also don't like Hunter x Hunter for not doing the thing it is you don't like. Do you like anything? Characters of this show are not in any terms special. Have you seen either Naruto, One Piece, Bleach? You know the personality of the main character. Have you seen Hunter x Hunter? I think this is a fair opinion if you've only seen the first few episodes, maybe just the Hunter exam arc. Gon does start out very admittedly generically, but to think that someone has reached the Chimera Ant arc and still thinks that his personality is a carbon copy of Luffy is just incompatible with my inbuilt logic. Add a bunch of extra side characters and you got them all. It's just the typical teenager character who is strong enough to change the world stuff. This one definitely needs an example, because here's a good question. When does Gon ever change the world? When does Gon ever change a country, a city, a town? When does Gon change anything except for a couple of rare individuals? It's the exact opposite of the typical stuff. Gon is consistently a teenager who is so weak that he struggles to change even a single person, let alone the world, and even ends up losing himself. He really does exist very much as the anti-shonen protagonist. He is a very wish-fulfilling character and not that much of a role model. I agree completely. I think that Gon is selfish, really selfish. He's definitely not a role model, and that is what makes him compelling. He's not a role model, he's a cautionary tale. And if you want a role model, then we already know what I'm gonna say next, but you need a more standard shonen. Art style is simple, and character design in the whole show is the worst I have ever seen, but of course, that's only my opinion. I mean, art is subjective, that's fair enough. And I know that words are difficult, but I just want to know why. So here's a potentially hot opinion. I'm not a fan of the Attack on Titan art style. Especially in the beginning, I find it very rough, very sketchy, and very samey. Like, a lot of the time, I think the characters just aren't distinguishable enough, and everything just evolves into this, like, generic blob of Isayama character design. And I'm not saying it's bad. I think that rough style very much adds a nice layer of texture to the atmosphere of the Attack on Titan world. It just doesn't appeal to me personally. And I guess it just would have been nice to know what it is about the Hunter x Hunter art style, which I think is very... It may be one of the most inoffensive art styles in all of anime. Just very schmick, very clean. So I would love to know what it is about that art style that just didn't really gel for you. So overall, this show is not more than a shonen, and I might add, the worst written shonen I have ever seen. But I am not into that genre, so I only saw a few of them. This is just so incompatible with everything the reviewer has said. He has spent this entire review insisting that Hunter x Hunter is a standard shonen, but then chastising it for not doing what a standard shonen should do. The main character isn't a role model. Some of the plot threads don't pay off. There's not enough fights, not enough action, too much character introspection, and yet not enough motivations. If you are a person who likes more mature stuff and think there is something behind this anime, otherwise it wouldn't be so popular, don't fall for the trap and stay away from it. In the end, you will just regret it. Meanwhile, the aggregate rating on my anime list for Hunter x Hunter remains at 9.04 out of 10, and I guess the main takeaway I have from this review is that Hunter x Hunter is bad. It's bad for many reasons, none of which I can name. If you have a reason, let me know in the comments.